Well, already we're seeing Easter decorations in stores and posts about Easter and crosses, and then you see the bunnies and you see both sides of that whole um, Easter thing. But today, I saw a little post somebody was talking about. I guess they were talking about the blood that Jesus had shed. And we know that after his crucifixion, the Bible said that he went into the holies of holies. He went into the heavenlies and sprinkled his own blood on the mercy seat. Because this was an ending, if you realize, this whole thing that Jesus came to do. And I've been, I'll probably be talking more about it, but the many reasons that Jesus went to the cross, it was many reasons. But one of the things, he was finishing an old covenant and he was opening up a new one. He's opening up a new one. In fact, it says that a new will cannot be opened until the testator's died. So you don't open your parents' will until they passed away. And so the new covenant was not opened up for humanity, closing out the old one that he had made with Abraham. But now he had a new covenant. Paul said. Paul said it was a new and a better way. It was a better covenant. Right? And because the old covenant had all these things to do with the shedding of blood. And they'd have to go in and they would do all kinds of sacrifices for years. You see this going on that the Israelites did. And we find out that he's talking he's talking a lot of these things to the Hebrews, Paul was, and trying to help them believe that we're coming out of the old system into the new. But he said that Jesus became the final sacrifice. Not only he was the final Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world, but he was also the final high priest. So he was the sacrifice and the sacrificer. And then after he died, he went and took his own blood, not the blood of a lamb like they had done for years, but his own blood. He became the sacrificial lamb that had already been slain in the mind of God before the foundation of the world. God had a plan before he ever put Adam in the garden. How many of y'all know he started with the end in mind? God didn't just haphazardly do this. He knew what he was doing. And there's a whole thing of why are we here and why is he doing all that? But here we go. I'm going to take of the blood for a minute. But Jesus went and sprinkled his blood. And he said that was the final sacrifice. And it was not just done now for the Israelites. It was not just done for those that had the covenant of Abraham. But now when the veil was rent in the temple, it separated Jew from Gentile. Now Paul said there is no more Jew nor Greek. Now there's no more male nor female. Now there's no more bond or free. So now we're all one. He broke down the middle wall of partition that was between us for years. The Gentiles didn't have access to the tabernacle. They didn't have anybody going in there and rolling their sins away. Think about that. That was only the Jews. That was only, well, back then they were the Israelites. They were the Hebrews. Those are all the same people. But they were the ones that had that, but the rest of the world didn't. But Jesus came to bring it to everybody. God was in Christ reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their sins against them. In fact, he imputed the sins where? Now the sins are written down on whose account? Not mine, not yours, but upon Christ, upon Jesus. Yes, that is the gospel message. The gospel is not what you need to go do. The good news is what he did. So let's get back to the blood. What is this blood thing? What is this whole thing about all these animal sacrifices? Well, the blood thing goes back to the beginning. It goes back to the garden. And what's reason why I want to say this too is because there's this teaching that somehow or another over the centuries now has filtered down into Christianity, which to me is one of the most despicable misunderstandings we have. That people act like, or we've even been taught, that Jesus had to go to the cross and shed his blood to appease his angry Father. That God was so disgusted with humanity, so disgusted with sin, that he couldn't look upon sin, that he was going to sacrifice his own son, not just sacrifice it, but have him tortured to death. And at the end where there was no blood, they poked a hole in him with a sword and out came blood. And then it was just water. They drained him every drop of blood. But the common thought is that is what it was going to do, not just to pay for our sin, but to appease God. that appeased God. Well, some don't even think that appeased God for everybody. It only appeased for his certain elect. He did that for a certain amount because that's his plan. Because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't know the justice of God. If you couldn't know the mercy of God, if you didn't see the evil part, you wouldn't see the good part. And yes, sacrificing a child and torturing death is evil for whatever cause. But we have believed that about God because we didn't understand why did that happen? Why did Jesus say, you don't take my life. I lay my life down. And in the garden, he said, not my will, but thy will be done. The flesh speaking to the spirit. My spirit don't want to do this, but my flesh don't want to do this. But my flesh says, my flesh don't want to do it, but my spirit says, okay, thy will be done. Because there was a plan here. But what was the plan? Was the purpose to appease an angry God? Well, see, where did that come from? It came from pagan teaching. Because the pagans back in the day believed that the gods would be angry because let's say they had a drought going on, or there was a flooding going on, a Nile had just flooded, or there was plagues happening. So they would say, well, the gods are angry. So we must do something to appease them. And so in their mind, to appease an invisible God, the God of the harvest, or the God of the Nile, or whatever gods they saw and believed in, they believed that the highest form to appease them would be to give them something that was most precious. So I'm going to appease them. So they decided the most precious thing that they could offer these angry gods would be a child, and even many times the firstborn child. Well, what's special about a firstborn child? Sometimes you think, well, that baby, that's the most special. No, a firstborn child indicates that child that's been born, this newborn baby that's a firstborn, you don't know if you're going to have any more. So you're giving not just that child, but even your hope of a future of having other children, which means would you have grandchildren, would you have great grandchildren? You don't have a legacy. You don't have a heritage. You don't have to be able to leave a heritage if you don't have a child. So it was a real big deal to sacrifice the firstborn. And so they believed the most precious thing you could do to try to save your whole family. So if the Nile was flooding, they all knew it was flooding and it had flooded. So that to save the rest of their children, to save their life, to save their livestock, to save their fields from flooding and them starving to death the next year because they had no harvest, they would find something special. They felt that was a newborn child. So they would take the blood of a child and sacrifice it to a god in hopes that this would change the mind of the angry god of the Nile, or the god of whatever was the problem. This is a mindset that was going on when you go way back to Abraham, who came out. They came from a pagan country. They came from a pagan upbringing. This had come after Noah, and after all these things that the world had became where they had gotten, they'd lost the vision. Not everybody, but they had lost the vision. Many of them had lost the vision of the one true God. And they had gone to doing that. So all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, because people start reading about all these sacrifices that God had them do, that they's like, well, that's what God is doing. He's angry. So he's asking, he's going to have to eventually do the most precious thing. And God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Well, that didn't say he crucified his only begotten son. He said he gave it. And given it, he gave the son to us. It was not God who crucified Jesus. It was the angry Jews. It was those that Jesus had ruffled their feathers and said, you're hypocrites and you're like snakes and vipers because you don't even care about the poor. You've taken what I've given you, what's precious, the law of God that I've entrusted, the oracles of God, he said to you. And now you've turned it around and you serve the God of your belly. That's your own fleshly desires. You've been deceived by the god of this world. What is the god of this world? Well, you can think it's Satan, but I know one thing's the god of it's money. It's money. It's those things that however if Satan uses it, but they had gotten, you look at them, and that's where he was so angry when he came, because they lost the view. They lost the vision of what the whole thing was about. Well, here we go. Let's go back to where this blood thing come from then. Where'd this blood thing come from? That somehow or another, that's what needed to be done. Well, we go back to the garden. The first blood we see shed was in the garden. This is after Adam and Eve had sinned. They now had a conscience. They were very aware. Their senses had been open in the natural. And a few minutes before, they were naked and they weren't ashamed. But after they ate, now their eyes were open. He said, and now their eyes, Jesus, Eve had just seen the tree was good so she could see, but then it said after she ate, then her eyes were open. Well, what eyes? The second set of eyes, the natural eyes. So now they're looking at things, and now they're looking at themselves and they're feeling condemned. And what did they do when they felt condemned? They ran and hid. They hid from God. Well, what did God go? Oh, you evil people, I can't look upon sin. I'm so holy. No, he went to him and said, Adam, where are you? He didn't just go to him, but then he did something. He went and covered them with animal skin. Well, if you're going to cover somebody with animal skin, they would have to say you killed the animal. So the first record we see is right there with the first people. He took and he covered them. He covered them so they would not be naked and ashamed. Well, the second time you see sacrifice was their sons. You see Cain and Abel. Okay, they knew the stories their mom and daddy told them what happened in the garden. I'm sure they knew it, but then it came time for them to sacrifice. Well, one of the sons, Abel, takes the firstling, there's that first fruit, firstling of his flock, killed that firstborn lamb, and offered it to God. Back to God. God never told, there's no record God said, he was the one who killed the first one. There was no saying, I need you to do that, but they did. But the second son went and took of his crop. He was a farmer, and he just took parts of it. It didn't say his first fruits of his garden. Later on, they would always give the first fruits because they understood God wanted what was first. But he just gave of it. Well, do you see there? So at this point, you see a second sacrifice. Well, this was after the garden. Now this is man trying to please God. They set upon this thing of trying to please God and do this with blood sacrifice because they understood the principle. It's life for life. Blood represents life. That was going to continue. That was a lesson that God was able to give them and showing that sacrifice. When God killed that animal, it wasn't to appease himself. It wasn't because you're so terribly, can't look on your nakedness. No, it was to appease their conscience. It was to help them to know that I love you. I love you, Adam. I've always loved you and always will. I love you even though you disobeyed me. And even after Cain and Abel failed, God came to Cain before he killed his brother. Because Cain was angry because God hadn't accepted his sacrifice. He said, no, that's not the principle I'm going to teach here about life for life, blood for blood. And so he told me, he goes, you need to get over it. You're angry. Because sin's lying at the door. It's trying to get you. You're fixing to go son. You're fixing to go somewhere. He was a loving father, came and warned him. He did not listen, ended up killing his brother. But even that, he said, God said, the blood of your brother cries from the ground. There's that blood. Wow. And you know what he did? God didn't. He told, here was your consequence, because sin always has consequence. He said, your consequence is the ground is cursed on your sake. You'll never be a farmer again. It's never going to give you crops. But what you're going to do, you're going to have to wander around the earth. But he said, oh, that is too great. People's going to want to kill me. And he said, no, I'm going to do something for you. He did something for Cain after he killed his brother. He said, I'm going to put a mark on him, and anybody that tries to harm you, I'm going to take care of. They're going to pay for trying to kill you if they try to harm you. What we see from the beginning, the sacrifice was always about God trying to show his love for us and show his mercy. It was not about appeasing an angry God. It was God showing his love and mercy, and he was going to show us his love by giving his firstborn. This is not us trying to appease him. This is God showing us, I love you so much. I'm going to come down. I'm going to put a robe of flesh. I'm going to come down and walk and talk on this earth like a human. And I'm going to be touched with you so I can feel what you feel. I'm going to be tempted as you're tempted. And then I'm going to go all the way to the point that I'm going to physically lay my life down. I'm going to lay my life down. I'll become the final sacrifice. I'm going to show you how much I love you by giving you my life's blood. This was not about you need to pay for your sin because you're such a disgusted bunch of depraved people that I can't even stand to look at. So I'm going to save a few of you just to show, but the rest I'm going to show my justice. Well, whatever justice you think God had, it was paid on Calvary. And he's not so weak in his sovereignty that he wouldn't had a plan that he couldn't save all of his humanity. God so loved the world. He gave him to us. He never said God so loved the world he sacrificed his own son. No. He gave his son, who laid his own life down by choice and went up in the holies of holies to show you the ultimate love. He sprinkled his own blood on the mercy seat once and for all, Paul said. What a beautiful love story. What a beautiful love story, life for life. Whatever death penalty Adam earned for humans, Jesus paid it off because it was once appointed unto man to die and after the judgment. So because of that, Jesus came and he paid the death penalty so that now we can be judged righteous. Now we're not judged according to our works. Oh, down here we are. There's consequences. Every day we go before the judgment seat of Christ. That's what Jesus is looking at us every day going, does Pam need a blessing or she needs some correction? That's an ongoing thing. He said, you judge yourself, you wouldn't be judged. I don't ever have to worry about going to the white throne of judgment to look at books. That was the people who lived and died under those books, the books of Moses, that will be judged according to that. I didn't live and die under the law. I live and die under grace. Thank you, Jesus. We have a different set of rules because we're under a different covenant. Jesus now is our high priest. Once and for all, I can go forth and be everything he's called me to be without condemnation. Even in my sin, I know I'll have consequences for missing the mark. But I want to tell you what I don't have. I don't have to fear my God because he's already paid the price for my ultimate deliverance, my healing, my salvation. Love you guys. Hope this is just starting us into that Easter season. No telling what else I'm going to be talking about that might ruffle some feathers. But hey, just think about it. And I'm not saying I have everything right, but I'm going to tell you, I know there's more to this picture than we ever dreamed. And God is revealing himself more every day. The closer we get to the end of this thing, the brighter the light. That because we've been coming out of the dark ages for a long time. Slowly, we're getting back to the original church. We're getting back and getting rid of a bunch of old corruption that Christianity took on through the years. Part of it came from paganism. And one of those was that God is an angry God who was so angry at sin that he had to kill his own child. That is not a God of love. That is deceit because we just didn't understand better. Why don't we maybe open our eyes? Maybe there's more than we've seen before. Bless you.